Hi, I'm Dr. Sheila Segerson, Director of Shelter Solutions at Maddie's Fund. Welcome to Maddie's Monthly Behavior Connection, a monthly webcast that's all about animal behavior. Our guest today is Tabitha Kucera. Tabitha is an elite fear-free and low-stress handling certified registered veterinary technician, a veterinary technician specialist in behavior, a certified cat behavior consultant, and also a Karen Pryor Academy certified training partner. She's the founder of Chirrups and Chatter Cat and Dog Behavior Consulting and Training, and is also the animal behavior technician at the Gentle Vet in Ohio. Today, Tabitha is going to be talking to us about feline communication and how to respond appropriately to what cats are telling us. This is a highly requested follow-up webcast to Cracking the Cat Code, which was about feline communication, and excited for this webcast. Welcome, Tabitha.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here. Let me pull up my PowerPoint. So I'm going to be discussing considered approach briefly because there are so many great questions, and I know I referred to considered approach in my previous webinar, which I highly recommend checking out. So we're going to just unpack that a little bit more. And when it comes to considered approach, although today we're going to be focusing on that initial approaching the animal, which is probably what many of you are thinking when you're like, approach. But considered approach not only encompasses the way we approach cats and dogs, but also it's all about recognizing all the sensory and environmental inputs that an animal may experience. So we know there are stressors in vet clinics, in shelters, in foster homes. And although some of those stressors we can't control, there are actually a lot that we can. And there is a lot of things that we could do to minimize those stressors, which we're not going to focus too much on today because we only have so much time. But it's not just the way we approach the animals we work with. It's also what can we do in the environment to just make every single interaction less stressful. So if I'm working with a shelter, I always have us kind of walk through the shelter and help us understand that, of course, we know that animals experience sensory environment differently than we do, in some ways similar as we do. So I always like to take a moment and just imagine the shelter from a cat's perspective. So walking through and seeing what do they hear, what do they see, what do they smell, especially as someone who mostly works with severe behavior cases, I'm aware of all stimuli because it affects my patients. So I'll smell something or I'll hear a beep that no one else hears. And the more in tune you get with those things, first off, just walking through your shelter and taking that in subconsciously, you're going to be more aware and empathetic and proactive. But then also over time, you're going to start noting those things as well and be able to adapt your approach or that environment to make it less stressful. So here are just a few things. Again, we're not going to get too much into it when it comes to planning for cat comfort. Like, for example, we all know cats need to scratch. So of course they need a hiding place, but they also need a scratcher. But we want to make sure it's stable and connected from the top and bottom, right? A lot of the times they're flinging all over, and I understand why that cat may not want to use that. Also, we know that shelters can be stressful, are stressful environments, and cats actually scratch to release stress. So again, it's very important for us to give them that outlet. Cats also scratch to release arousal. Like when you first come home during your long day, you walk in your house and your cat runs and scratches, it's because they're so stoked and they need a bit of an outlet for that arousal. And if we provide those outlets, they're less likely to escalate, which is great. This is a shelter in Texas that I worked with. They essentially installed frosted window screens. And some of these are just things you could buy at like local hardware stores. And the increase in their adoptions went up significantly. Like they shared with me, they were amazing and they were keeping research. And even the owner, like the CEO, was blown away at the difference. And I was like, I get it. Where like the cats can't see all that stressful stimuli out, but people can see in. You can do different levels of that. Of course, like curtains, making sure cats have elevated spaces, hiding spaces, as you can see from this cat room, right? And also, I love a shelter that has those beautiful big windows, whether we're talking about cats or dogs. But one thing that's important is there should be blinds that can close, because I work with a few shelters that are in really high attended areas where the walk pedestrian traffic is a lot. And I cannot imagine what those cats and or dogs are going through if that's literally what they're dealing with all day. So I understand that that can be beneficial to have that sunlight, have people looking at them. And we also, I love humans, but we're very inconsiderate with our approach in many cases, especially through windows. So a lot of shelters just purchase some pretty affordable blinds that they can close and open. Or for example, if you're working with a fearful cat, again, as a veterinary professional, I work with a lot of those. Instead of going around and telling everyone to shh, which is aversive to humans as well, and it's not time efficient, I could just put up a sign that says fearful feline. People who know nothing about body language or animals are subconsciously going to be quieter and better as far as approaching that cat or waiting to knock on that door until I come out. So just little things that we could do that make a big difference. But what we're going to focus on today is our approach and body language. And it's really important to maintain good communication between the whole team and caregivers. Whether I'm working with a foster, a shelter, staff member, a caregiver, I am always communicating everything I'm doing. And if I have a really fearful animal, like I'm communicating what I'm doing prior to going and getting the animal. As a baby tech, we would go work with the animal and not talk at all. And then we wouldn't even know who was starting the exam, who was drawing blood. I was like, how did we not? And this wasn't malicious on our parts. It's just, we were not communicating at all. And that causes a lot of issues, increases stress, wastes a lot of time, right? So communication is key. We want to check ourselves, and I mean that in the kindest way. I work in very fast-paced places. I deal with a lot of heavy emotional things, as I'm sure many of you do. And we have physiological changes just like animals do with body language. So you might not realize how tense and quick you're moving and things like that. So it's really important. Something I do is like, I check myself. I check my tools that I'm using, like an anesthetic machine or my nail trimmers or whatever. I check the animal, but I also check myself and take a deep breath, right? It's also really important to understand cat body language, which I get in a lot in that previous webinar. And then, of course, we want to assess the cat's body language throughout, not just initially, not during the time we cut their nails or give their meds or play with them, throughout. And we want to adapt what we're doing based on what that cat is telling us. So from my first webinar, I mentioned it's really important to always observe before interacting. And I'm not saying like you have to observe them for an hour, because in many cases in a shelter, you don't need to interact with that cat in that second, like really. In a veterinary type standpoint, or let's say you're giving meds or something along those lines, you may have to interact with them more quickly, but there is very rare situations, except for a true emergency, where I see cat or dog, I immediately have to engage with them within 5 seconds. That is not ideal, and that's not needed in most cases. So I'm always going to assess prior, before interacting with that animal. I'm going to assess with me from a distance. I may be a trigger. It's not personal. Also, that cat may not be feeling well, which makes people approaching them harder. We have to consider all of this. And then again, I'm going to monitor during the interaction and adjust my approach based on that. So we're going to look at everything, right? Tension in body, eyes, ears, tail, where is the body? So we're not just looking at one part, we're looking at the whole picture. And we all know, based on my first webinar, cats don't become red or bite out of nowhere. There are usually a lot of signals prior to then that many, including myself, were not taught. So it sometimes appears as if cats just go to the red. But once you are empowered and have that education and can better understand cats, you can identify those earlier signals and adjust your approach or be aware of what's going on to prevent the cats from going red. So again, just a quick example, we start with that green, and then as that cat, let's say it's that the trigger keeps approaching or whatever may be happening, understandably, they continue to escalate. Just like if one of you came to threaten me, I would do displacement behaviors, avert my gaze. I may then vocalize, I may then but eventually I will punch you, even though I'm very friendly, because aggression is a normal communication tool, right? It's not my first thing I want to do. So when it comes to considered approach foundations, what we like to look for is overall, we want to avoid looming or reaching out, right? even this type thing, right? Like, let's say this is the cat and my finger's here. That's way too close. Or even with a dog. I know we're talking about cats, but it's the same thing. I want to speak and move quietly. So not how I lecture, but I'm talking to humans, so it's okay. I want to avoid abrupt movements to the best of my ability. Like if I'm tossing a treat for a cat or a dog, I use a wrist. I don't do that. Even with an animal that isn't exhibiting high fear and stress, I'm minimizing my movements to the best of my ability because I understand that that can be really scary, even for an animal that is exhibiting minimal stress. But once I start moving like that, it begins to escalate, right? I'm going to avoid a full frontal approach and direct eye contact. And I'm going to turn my body sideways as I begin to approach, especially if that animal's fearful. I'll be honest, in most to all interactions I have, I'm just using a side approach now as just second nature. And then I'm going to begin to incorporate touch. So I'm not going to just approach a cat, touch. I may approach, wait 5 seconds, and then touch, right? So again, I mentioned incorporating that touch gradually. I have a few videos, but that's more handling related things. But again, I'm not just approaching cat, injection, go, right? I'm approaching cat, touching, assessing, giving that injection, and or choosing to give that injection somewhere else based on how that initial approach was. So I'm adjusting my approach and handling to that, how that cat takes my touch. I'm going to respect that cat's preferred space. So I may examine the cat or interact with the cat in a cage. If I have a really fearful cat and I'm doing a cage cleaning, I'm going to lure you to the other side, or you're probably already in your hiding spot that we've provided because we're great. I'm going to place a towel over that hiding spot and clean on the other side. You don't need to interact with me, especially if you're showing signs of fear. You should not be forcing interaction with this cat. Like, hey, you hide, cool. I'm going to clean over here. Or if I'm doing like a blood work or exam, in many cases, I'm doing it in their carrier. I'm going to do it where they prefer. If I'm going in an exam room or in a cat only ward, I'm going to avoid having, to the best of my ability, people coming in and out constantly. If I have a really fearful cat, I'm going to locate them higher up, like place them higher up and not so close to the door, right? Because this is a lot. And what can I do? I can put them higher up and farthest away from the door, right? For sure. I'm going to identify where they prefer to be touched and give the injection based on that, what I kind of mentioned before. In the cases I can, I'm going to utilize consent-based interactions. So the amount of human-directed, petting and petted, directed, all this aggression that I see as a behavior consultant, in many cases, it can be managed and or prevented if we just taught people body language and consent. Many cats do not get interacted with consent. We start without getting it, and then we end actually on a bad note. Like they're averting their gaze, they're shifting their weight, they're looking at your hand, they're actually biting or swatting your hand, or they're just running away. That started and ended badly. So a consent-based interaction is a cat approaching you or being near you with relaxed body language. And as you can see there, I wasn't here or here, I was here, and that lean in is pretty intense. And then when I do pet, I only pet once or twice on the head, neck, or shoulders, which is where most cats prefer. And then I remove my hand. If they want more pets, they ask. And as you can see, he's like leaning his whole body. He's purring very loudly. And of course, with your cat, you may say, oh, we'll do a few strokes. You know your cat, just like my husband can come up to me and make out with me. But if one of you lovely people did, that would be inappropriate because relationships matter. And sometimes I see people forget that. And they're like, my cat interacts with me like this. So every cat I work with should be like that cat. And I'm like, whoa. So a safe thing is, hey, I'm going to get consent. That cat chooses to approach me, or I approach that cat in some cases. And that cat's exhibiting mostly relaxed body language. And if I put my hands like here, or they might be already going in, lean in, pet once, twice, remove hand. If they just smell your hand, no disrespect. They're not asking for pets. You remove their hand, your hand. It's great. And just a little bit about cat carrier etiquette. Of course, we're going to avoid pulling or shaking a cat out of a carrier. We're going to assess body language and use a treat or toy to lure them out. that cat is exhibiting higher FAS, and again, this is where I adapt, I'm probably going to just cover that carrier up and wait to do everything at the same time instead of let me take you out, let me do this, this, and this, let me put you back, let me take you out again. Again, not only does it escalate stress, but it wastes a lot of our time too. I'm always going to take the carrier apart. I carry cats like the beautiful animals that they are. From the bottom of the carrier, cats don't want to go on roller coaster rides. Cats also don't want to have a carrier break and escape in a parking lot. There's multiple reasons for everything I recommend. So this is just an example of me placing my cat in my car. There's classical music playing. The car was already started prior to my cat going in. There's reasons why my cats love the vet, and it's because I'm considering all stimuli around them and doing what I can. So that's that considerate approach. And again, there's no cat in this carrier, but we've all been there where the client or like a volunteer comes in and they have this cat that is overweight and there's no non-slip surface. The cat's sliding over here and the cat's just like hit like their hip like 5 times, has gone on a roller coaster ride when we could have prevented that, right? And just held them like the beautiful gifts that they are, right? And here's just like a baseline video of some of those foundations when it comes to approaching a cat in a cage. So again, I'm very different than I am when I speak to humans. So I'm assessing the cat's body language. And again, I'm always using that side approach, avoiding. So I'm not saying don't look at the cat, but I'm not like, I'm looking at the cat, but I'm not staring at them. I'm going to avoid speaking. In some cases, I'm not even talking, especially if I'm working with a fearful cat. All stimuli is more intense when you're scared, humans and cats and dogs. So in some cases, I'm not going to talk at all. Versus what I know a lot of us do. And to be fair, I used to do, right? Oh, it didn't play it. Oops. Well, I'll say it then. Ha ha ha. It's essentially approaching the cage. And in the video I have a kitten, a stuffed cat in a cage because I don't want to actually stress out a real cat. And there's a kitten down here and other cats in these cages. And I approach and I'm talking to someone else. So I'm like, hey, dude, I'm coming. Yeah, cool. I open the cage. I loom over to get the cat. And then I'm like, yeah. And then I close the cage and then I really got to make sure it's closed. So I vibrate and shake the whole cage, which is something that I totally used to do, most likely. And many of us do. We're not malicious. We're just not thinking about it. And with that approach, most cats are escalating 2 to 3 points of FAS because of literally the way we approach. And it makes sense. And actually in the one video, which I'll definitely share so we can show it, but it's essentially what I said. The kitten at the bottom, his FAS, it's hard to see, but his FAS goes up 1 to 2 points while I'm doing that. He returns to baseline really quickly, but not only did me doing a fake inconsiderate approach to the stuffed cat affects that kitten, but all the cats in the other cages. So this is a big deal and something that we can easily adjust to decrease stress for everybody involved. So here's an example of a cat in a carrier. I'm approaching from the side. We have a non-slip surface. There's classical music, all the classic stuff and I have a variety of distractions or reinforcers because they're a little bit different in the way I use them. So his ears are forward. His eyes are almond shaped. He was kind of right at the front of the carrier. His face is fairly soft, right? But he's not super engaged in things. So he's probably like an FAS 2 because there's some lip licks, averting gaze. And then he's like, I don't want to do this anymore. So then he backs up. He eats the treat. So I was going to lure him out, but then I was like, oh, he's a little unsure. You know what? I'm just going to close the carrier and take it apart, which is what I do. And then that results in, again, I do a lot of things on my own, which I always recommend having help. But then I just have him remain in his carrier with the towel as a hiding place, along with his safe, familiar place of his carrier, and I do his exam there. But if I would have did what I was taught, where, hey, don't assess the cat at all, scruff them, pull them out, all this stuff that I was taught that just did not set me up for success at all, and causes these FAS 3 to 5 cats. Like I work with cats who have been fired from veterinary clinics, who, you know, a lot of shelters have challenges interacting with them. And all I do is considered approach and assess and adapt my handling to them. And they're FAS 0 to 1 with me. But again, they went on roller coaster rides. They were pulled out of, you know, all of those things were happening, which is what caused those escalations. And you can see by the end of this exam, he's like, FAS is not only managed, but it's actually decreased. So he's like, oh, I'm cool with being popped out. I'm starting to explore. My head's a little higher. I'm actively eating. I'm exploring the treat. You're such a good boy. And a big part of that was because of my approach. Because some people might say, taking the carrier takes too long, or part takes too long. And I'm like, taking a carrier part takes like a minute. And as someone that works with lots of cats, especially fearful ones, the effects of that results in a quicker, more efficient exam. We get everything we need to get done. The animal has less stress versus, again, what I was taught and what many of us have been taught. And then we're like, why is this cat FAS 4? And I'm like, well, I can tell you why. We could have prevented that and prevented people from getting hurt and prevented escalation. And it's all about approach. So here is another example of me just using considered approach. And these are all from videos of awesome shelters I work with and different veterinary clinics. So you see that there's enrichment in there. They have a hiding space. I am playing something called a purr app. Purring is a self-soothing sound, so I don't recommend playing that for hours. But as someone that does travel stuff, I will play it while I'm interacting with a fearful cat or drawing blood or doing something like that. Because again, what can I do to minimize stressful stimuli? So this cat with my approach was hiding, probably in FAS 2 because you guys couldn't see them behind the towel. But with my approach, they are actively soliciting attention and leaning in for pets, like huge. But I had to transfer this cat. And ideally, you know, if a cat has a box, which many cats in cages, we all know they need hiding places. So I would just place the towel over the box and move the cat that way, or place them in a carrier by taking the carrier apart, not through that door. That is not, we do not place cats through those doors. We can lure them, but if you're placing a cat in a carrier should be taken apart. And then when I'm using a towel, you're going to see that I put the towel over my hands. So I'm not like this. It's over my hands and I'm moving slowly and I'm very aware of my movements. And I support the cat's head and hind end. But ideally, we would be moving them in a box or something, but we were just walking to the other cage. And then this would be an example of me returning the cat. So I'm going to make sure, for example, we've all been there, right? Where you're bringing a fearful cat, or whether you're putting them in for the first time or whatever, and no, the cage isn't open. No one's there to help you. And you're just like, how did I not think to communicate to open this first? I have a cat. I can't safely, I shouldn't be like leaving my hand here, blah, blah, blah. So I wanted to make sure like, hey, that cage is already set up. I don't want to place the cat in an empty cage and then be like, oh, you're really fearful, or even you're not super fearful, but now I'm going to put a bunch of new stuff in there. That's where communication matters. I'm going to set that cage up before you go in there. I'm going to be and then I move my hands, that cat, I allow them to leave. So I'm not like, boop, he chose to leave and go back into his hiding space. Cool. And then I'm just ending by giving him a treat because he was comfortable enough to eat. Obviously, I may not do that if he's high FAS, like FAS 4 or 5. And then I close the kennel, but I close it because these are loud cages. Everyone has different cages. And you're going to see I close it very gently and then I cover it up because this cat just had a lot of medical diagnostics. And even if I'm doing everything in my power to keep that less stressful using feline friendly handling techniques, that's stressful. So then I'm covering the cage up to minimize visual stimuli along with that hiding place. Just more examples, so many. So this cat, again, you're going to see that side approach is just always utilized. And I assessed that cat ahead of time. And she was like FAS 1 to 2. And also I have some baseline of this cat. And this is what I always say to cats in shelters, because in vet med, sometimes we only meet a cat twice, once a year, or in shelters, one benefit. And also I know there's a bummer. You know, these cats, you know what these cats, you may be that person that cleans that cat's cage every single day. So you're aware of what that cat's baseline is. So we knew how this cat, even with FAS 3 or 4, is like, I love food and it manages and or decreases my stress. So she now is FAS 0 to 1 at vet visits because every experience has been less and less stressful. But her first like 3 visits were FAS 3 to 4. And again, I assessed that. So I was like, oh, I'm going to lure you out. And then I began that, here, let me lure you out. And then she's eating. And then I offer a bit of touch once she's eating for a minute. Here's another example of a stranger cat I've never met. I get consent from all the caregivers to utilize these videos because that's important. So this cat showed interest in when I approach them. Also, if I'm using a distraction, you don't want to do it like this. You're going to see I'm always approaching from the side, even with that. And this cat, I had something super smelly. I opened it up and I just placed it, not their face was here. I placed it over here. They chose to approach and sniff it. So I was like, and their ears went forward a bit. So I was like, oh, I think they might be into this. So I'm getting a lot of information. And they're a little more hesitant, but then they're like, okay. And if they would have stayed in the carrier, no big deal. I would have just closed and changed my approach. So I'm not going to play this whole video, but this is an example of me entering a room with just a cat, free roaming room. And you're going to see when I first approach, I'm using that side approach. I'm avoiding direct eye contact. I'm like, what's up? I reach my hand, not obviously I'm a distance from her, and she's like, eh. And for context, I had to give, this cat needed an exam and some veterinary diagnostics. So, because if I was cleaning this cat's room or something like that, I would probably just, hey, go chill. Like I'm still going to use considerate approach. I'm not going to approach you or interact with you immediately. But let's say you guys were doing like some enrichment time, or again, you needed to interact with her in some way, I would do it like this. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to start, sorry for wobbly. This is iPhone reality. So I was like, oh, let me just toss some toys. I'm just getting a vibe of what, and she's like, dude, I don't care. So then I sit here and I notice when I move closer, her body language does not change at all. Because sometimes you moving closer, you'll notice, understandably, a change. This cat had no change really. And she's like, you're cool, but she didn't lean in. She's like, what was that? So in this case, she didn't lean in and I still petted her because this was from like a long time ago. I'm a beautiful, chunky lady. And I don't think it was wrong, but I think it's important to share because sometimes if they're exhibiting, especially because if I have to interact with them, right? So I petted her a few times and she actually starts to, you guys kind of saw that lean in, like hardcore, super duper lean into my pets and starts to soften. So that's where, again, I'm assessing that body language. And then she becomes so comfortable that and also this is really helpful for me because I get to examine her gait and the way she moves and stretches from a veterinary standpoint, which was really helpful also because this cat actually had some underlying medical pain and some other things. And you could see she's like chill, like tail up and curved. Please pet me more. Please pet me more. And then she actually starts to go into my lap. Such a sweet baby. And I'm avoiding like interacting with her because yes, she's adorable. And yes, I want to squeeze her, but cats don't like that, right? And I actually, once she settles in on my lap, I start her exam just right there. And then of course, when I draw blood and things, we just do it on that table that's in there, because drawing blood on a lap is a bit challenging. So I tend not to do that. This is just an example of a cat I worked with a shelter. I teach shelters behavior modification, clicker training to work with really fearful cats. And I loved the shelter came up with this. So this cat was really fearful, but she's more comfortable approaching the front of the cage. She has one eye that was removed due to medical issues. So one thing is, if we're interacting with this cat, we're always approaching from the side she can see. Sounds like common sense, but it's something a lot of us, we don't think about it. And then they're like, we know that jump is a big step for her. And also she wasn't super stoked about being picked up. And they were just doing clicker training enrichment out of cage time. So they were like, hey, this cat tree's in here. Let's put it up to the cage. And they were like, oh my God, she immediately came out because she felt safer. And I was like, you guys are amazing. And that's where we're utilizing the environment and adapting our approach to make it easier for the cats we work with. And this shelter is utilizing what they know about that cat. How can we make this easier? And it used to take her, a minute or two to choose to come out of the cage. And then they're like, oh my gosh, also this cat had some pain. And they put this near the cage and they're like, she came out within a second, because they were thinking outside the box, but also adapting those interactions to that individual cat. You're so pretty. This is her just doing like a high five. Oh my gosh, she's so cute. This is another example of just a considerate approach with an awesome shelter I work with in Rhode Island. So this is a mother, as you can see, with all her babies. And her face is fairly soft. Her ears are forward. Her eyes stayed fairly almond shaped. So she puts her paw, haha, everybody, can you tell I work with animals? Her hand out. And the cat disengages, no big deal. But then she's like, hey, and you can see she's getting up to start to lean into her hand. So we're getting like full on beautiful consent. And you need some love outside the time with the babies because you're busy. So just an example of how considered approach looks. This is an example of a cat with arousal, which is very common in shelters. And in many cases, bites that cats do due to arousal can be prevented. Because in many cases, I totally understand how people miscommunicate or misunderstand. So you either go into the free roaming cat room or towards a cat cage. And let's say you guys were closed at night because, of course, we can't live at the shelter. And you guys walk in, whether it's one of these rooms or a cage, and the cat's like, meow, 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 meow. And they're rubbing up against your legs. People misinterpret that as invite to pet. And what they tend to do is loom over, because the cat's by their legs, loom over pet cat, and then cat swats or bites. So that cat's just like super stoked. It makes sense. Like you're bored. I mean, when I travel, if I'm gone for 3 days, like I hug my husband when I get home and I'm stoked, So that cat is just really aroused. So we don't want to loom over them or pet them. In many cases, if we just utilize considerate approach and approach like this room, like calmly and not really like, hey, what's up? Blah, that cat's arousal decreases within 30 to 60 seconds. And then those movements are more like they may be doing those affiliative rubbing behaviors, but they're not like those ears go forward, that face softens, those whiskers stop splaying out as much, that tail stops twitching, or we can give them something to do immediately. So this is an example of a kitty. Oops, I should use this mouse. So you can see he's moving kind of quickly and he has piloerection along his shoulders. It's really subtle. His whiskers are starting to splay out. He's a little rouse boy. And he keeps running in front of her. So this was a cat that actually bit quite a few people before we started working together. And this was just after speaking to this awesome shelter for 5 minutes. This was the first approach that they changed up. And then obviously we spoke longer, but I immediately gave them some input and it was already better. So you can see she didn't immediately pet him or interact with him. She's not talking to him. And she used the food like, hey, go over here. She's waiting for him to walk in front of her. And then she's like, go eat that. Here, eat these treats. And then she's going to go clean the litter boxes away from him. As management, I had her avoid moving that way. So she was always in front of him so she could always see. But again, a lot of it was just, he was so aroused. People would misinterpret because he's super handsome, meow, 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 as pet me. He would then swat and or bite. Understandably, human would react and say, loud thing, bad word, reacts, blah, 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 would escalate the cat, right? And a lot of this could have been prevented. Also, this cat had some pain. I promise it's not every cat, but he was an all four paw declawed cat. So yeah, that was making touch even more challenging for him, because if you're painful, even positive touch can be really hard. And then eventually worked up to just, hey, he gets something outside, like, because they have this awesome catio that he just has access to. So they would just walk right to the door, give him something, and then he'd go through the door, they'd close it, clean everything really well, and then open the door and then maybe give him a treat or two in a calm manner. That's the other thing. I didn't have them tossing. I'm not opposed to tossing treats as immediate management. Like, hey, I think that's great. Like right when you walk in, like, go. Hey, use that arousal, do that. But with this cat, he had some high arousal plus some other things. So I was like, I want to focus on like chill vibes, which is why I told them to give a lickable instead, because tossing a treat or a toy can sometimes escalate arousal, which is why I purposely had said, hey, walk in, use considered approach, avoid eye contact, avoid looming, and give him something lickable. And the cool thing is this cat didn't bite anyone else, and he got adopted, and he was set up for success, and his pain was managed. And yes. Beautiful. So this is just a quick example of me working with a cat. It's forwarded, obviously. So this is more advanced behavior modification, but this is a cat that was terrified of people entering the home, and had some generalized anxiety in general. And of course, I don't have to interact with a cat to help, but I did something called capturing, which is capturing a behavior a cat does naturally. I avoided clicking because this cat or marking. So I just reinforced this cat for like any forward movement, or like leaning in or looking at me. But I also gave the treat very far away. So I wasn't tossing the treat. I was actually like giving the treat on a lickable thing away from me. And you can see my face here. So this was probably a 3-minute session, speeded up. And literally, I use considered approach along with some behavior mod. And caregivers think I'm magic. Shelters think I'm magic. I'm not. And you can see my face. I'm like, I don't react in my heart. I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Because this cat solicited attention. So not only were they comfortable coming out, which they hide even after the person left. Like that's how fearful they were of people entering. They didn't return to baseline for hours until the person was gone after. And because of considered approach and a little bit of positive reinforcement and behavior modification, this cat was actually soliciting attention. And then I can get the care that I need for that cat in a medical situation, which is really helpful. But with this cat, I help them form better associations with people entering and just people in general, which I do a lot with shelter cats. Like if I can teach them going to the front of the cage is awesome and fun, that gets them more adaptable. They're more comfortable with people because their interactions with humans are more predictable and consistent. Just a win-win. So the last thing I'm going to mention is just a little bit about considering approach for medication. So I'm a sucker for cooperative cat care. I have tons of resources if you want to learn more. But when it comes to how we approach a cat, when it comes to medicating them, she loves her meds. So I'm always going to use a side approach. I usually will interact with them. So instead of just really quick, because although we feel like that's better, it's usually not. Like, boo, I just want to get this over with. I'm going to give the 2 mLs as quickly as possible. And then they're just like, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not saying you have to do it in like 3-minute time, but that initial, like just super quick, abrupt, it's not I understand why I used to do that, but it's not as helpful as you think. So I interact with her. I allow them to sit how they're comfortable. So many cats understandably rather be, she's missing a front leg, rather be sitting in front of me. So I don't have her like me staring at her. And then I gave her meds. Didn't even realize I did it that quick. And you're going to see I always approach from the side and touch the face. And then I do, instead of the blowing, holding thing, cats love rubs here. So I do that instead. And then she chooses to hang out for her thing. Here's just this is more advanced stuff, but I just want to touch on it. If I'm working with like a really fearful cat where maybe sedation is needed, or this is high FAS, or I'm doing an exam on a high FAS cat. Again, in a shelter setting, if you're cleaning a cage, this is where you just allow them to hide. Like of course, we're not doing this. But in many cases, I could just communicate with someone who's skilled as handling and skilled with cat body language. Because if you're unsure or fearful, as you can imagine, we're just setting up the human and the cat to fail. And we communicate, where's the head? And we have those towels and injections given, or I could utilize the towel handling techniques to examine, like I'm handling the cat while the vet or whoever I'm working with is examining from the back, all that beautiful stuff. So there is a lot of positive impact on cats and the people who love them. As you can see from all of this text, text heavy slides aren't fun. But it reduces stress, fear, and reactivity. It improves recovery and health outcomes. It increases safety for staff and volunteers. It creates more positive experience. Let's give cats more positive human experiences. They are so sweet, because real talk, everybody, cats don't get a lot of that. But we're all out here, including you awesome people, changing that. Encourages a culture of empathy and consistency across the shelter, strengthens the shelter reputation for cat-friendly care. I mean, the reasons for doing this is endless, right? So we want to when we're making the first move, we want to approach cats with care, practice considered approach every shift. Again, those tiny changes, people are like, every cat, and I'm like, that's not my experience, but it's probably because I do these things that prevents, like, the amount of FAS that is prevented with the way I approach cats and dogs now is mind blowing. Like, I'm like, why was I taught ways that literally cause them severe stress? Like, I would always start off on the wrong paw immediately. So these things can make a big difference. Share observations and insights with your team and your caregivers. Encourage ongoing learning. You guys are already doing that. And you're committing to improving cat welfare and adoption outcomes. And then, of course, outcomes, advocating for feline-friendly handling practices in your workplace. So thank you for all you amazing people do. That's what this cat is saying. I know you all want to learn more. So here are some great resources, including Maddie's Fun, Fear Free. I have an upcoming event covering all things handling. And I really appreciate Maddie's Fun for hosting these super important conversations.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tabitha. This was amazing.
Sheila's so kind. She has to say that.
I do not have to say that. You are just amazing in talking about things in a way that, like, breaks things down into details that you sometimes don't think about, especially with someone like you who's so experienced, but really recognizing that these are things that are so important. And you're just so energetic and entertaining, and obviously love what you do. So I am very serious in my comments.
Thank you. Take that reinforcement from your friends and colleagues, everybody. We all suck at taking compliments. Take them. You're awesome.
Yes, very good point. All right, we do have questions. The first is, what is the name of the Purr app that you use?
Oh, I should know that. Sorry, I'm going to look at my phone, everybody. It's not because I'm checking text. It's because I'm looking up the app. I think it's the E. So I know it's on iPhone because, you know, Android. It's capital E / or hyphen capital Z Purr app. I don't know if it's on Android, but I know it's on iPhone if you search apps, and it's free. Or, I know it sounds silly, just, you guys get to hang out with cats all the time. Just record purring. Yeah, because I have one friend who actually, her kid falls asleep to the app. It's precious.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It helps us be comfortable too. So
yeah. Yeah, so true. All right. Next is, other than Churu, what are the packets that you are using with kitties?
Oh, wait, what'd you say? I'm sorry. Let me look.
Other than using
Oh,
Churu, what are the packets that you use?
so I use tons of treats and that I love Chirrup. They don't pay me. So I shouldn't say that, but I I love lots of treats. I think I'll use like the Tiki Cat or there's so many, right? All of those like meat, I call them meat water, which super low calories, super disgusting smelling. And I love lickables because cats lick lickables. And again, we're encouraging that like vibes. So I like, if you look up any lickable treat, because I know back in like 10 years ago, we were like chicken baby food without onions. Thankfully, y'all, we've came far. We don't need to buy that expensive chicken baby food anymore because we have all these meat water tubes. But what I would recommend is always having a variety because you saw in a lot of those videos, I had lots of stuff. That's my biggest takeaway because sometimes I'll go into a clinic or a shelter and I love that they have peanut butter or a treat for a dog, but they have like one treat and it's like from the rep and it's 5 years old. And I'm like, y'all, come on, let's have a variety of distractions and things. And you'll find what the cats you work with like. But in my experience, it's lickable, smelly, disgusting meat tubes, whichever. There's so many brands now, but that's a good question.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question is, when do you decide not to wait for them to lean in before trying to pet, as in the video with the free roaming cat on the table with the plaid blanket?
So in that case, so this is cool. I record a lot of what I do because I teach, but also it's really eye-opening because sometimes I'm like, why did I do that? Because I'm a human and I'm not perfect. Um, so in my brain, I was like, oh, I shouldn't have pet her yet. But also, this is where we have to assess, right? I had to interact with that cat because of a medical thing. So in the case of like, you need vet care right now, because let's say you have a high FAS cat and they need an injection that they need within the next few days. We don't have benefit to that shelter life. You don't have to do it that second. And in many cases, it's going to save everyone a lot more time. With this cat, she needed to be examined. I had to draw blood and interact with her. So I reached in and she didn't like when she smelled my hand, nothing changed in her body language, which is why that was a while ago. So I can't say what was in my brain, but I think that's why I was comfortable petting her. And then the second my hand touched her, she softened and started like, so I was like, oh, all right. So then I petted her more, but then I removed my hand and remained that consent-based interaction. So even in the context of when we need to touch the cat, again, when you're cleaning and doing, you do not need to touch the cat. But there are cases where we do need to touch the cat. And that's where, like, let's say I took my hand or I put my hand near her and FAS escalated. I may have choose to stand up and approach her from the side or utilize a towel with some feline friendly hand. Like I would have changed my approach in that second. And that's where adapting my approach and assessing body language, it sounds challenging, but it becomes easier the more and more you do it. And because you're doing that, the cats do so much better versus I'm going to do the same thing with every cat, which we all know that's not how they're all individuals and have different preferences.
Okay, thank you. Wonderful. All right, next, if you have a portalized cage consisting of two parts and both have doors, now this is an interesting question. Do you open the door where the cat is, or do you choose to open the other door to give the cat the chance to come out on its own?
You're amazing because you are already critically thinking and unpacking stuff, you wonderful person. I would open the door on the side that the cat isn't on. If the cat's exhibiting like, and also anxiety, arousal is a way cats exhibit anxiety. Just like some humans are like way more fidgety and some humans are shut down. So I'm going to assess that cat's body language. And let's say that cat's like more like flight, kind of fear, freeze type stuff. I'm definitely going to go on the other side. But let's say that cat's like, meow, 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 meow. I'm still going to probably go on the other side, but they're going to approach you right away. So in that case, I'm going to have like a wand toy that's longer than this, right? And I'm going to have my hand here. And if they're over here, I'm going to have a wand toy, or I'm going to just give a lick of churro or a toy and then open. Like, hey, focus some of that arousal on here to prevent you from running out of the cage. So even that way, I'm going to kind of be a little bit more aware, but usually I'm always going the way the cat going through the door, that the cat is not on that side in most cases.
Thank you. All right. Next question is about a cat who was surrendered due to love biting after bunting. And she thinks you probably answered this in the presentation, but I'm going to ask it in case you have other tips. So this is a person who's fostering a cat like this, and who she typically bored and meow and rubbing around and then would love bite. So now she's correcting herself and waiting for the kitty to come to her. And like she said, she's in foster. Any other recommendations related to this cat or the cat you showed the video of?
So in some cases, and I deal with pretty severe stuff, but in some cases, some of my management is, hey, I know you love cats and I do too, but I want you to not touch the cat for 7 to 10 days. Like, I have 3 caregivers right now, and their management plan was do not touch your cat for 7 to 10 days. And it's really interesting because what happens is I also get more buy-in. I obviously explain the why, but like within 3 days, they're like, the cat is asking, because I'm like, if they ask for pets, but to start, I want to set my human up for success. Don't touch cat. Easy to follow. Like with that cat, for that shelter you saw she did not touch cat. That was part of management. Do not touch cat, because it's easier for us to follow. And then what happens is that cat starts being like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then they start actually soliciting attention more, where clients were like, we're 5 days in and my cat or dog has never asked me for this much pet in their whole life. And I'm like, I got you. And they get it. So I would give them some time to recover, honestly, and give them a few days without touching them at all. And then, like you mentioned, doing that consent-based petting where we're only petting them for 1 to 2 seconds. And you probably noted I avoided like the long stroke, which again, once you know that cat better, your cat may like that. But for a lot of cats, that's way too much. So just 1 to 2, and then you can maybe work up to, and then removing your hands and assessing. But that's the only other thing. There's other things we could do is like make sure people are playing with them appropriate. Like I have a how to play with your cat handout on my website. It sounds like common sense, but again, some of the things they sell, they have a glove out there, everybody. A glove that you put on your hand that has cat toys for caregivers. What? Caregivers are not set up for success. So also when you're considering cats that are love biting, consent-based interactions, management, maybe not petting them at all for a minute, or only having people that understand body language, and then also talking about what appropriate play looks like, interacting with them in a way that encourages that, and then providing enrichment in other ways outside of that to make sure their needs are met. I know that was long, but that's how I would simplify it.
Great, thank you. And then just to add, if you're someone who likes books, Michael Delgado has a great book on playing with your cat. All right, next question, another good and interesting one. If you're giving a pill and they do end up spitting it out, do you attempt to give it again right away, or do you wait?
You know what I'm going to say because I'm annoying. It depends. It depends, right? So if in some cases I may, and in some cases I may not, and I wish I could be more like, hey, because I may change up my medication technique, because I have like 15 different medication techniques and many of us don't have that in our toolbox, right? So I would, if like, let's say you medicate them and you notice that there was tension when you were doing this, but then not at any other time, maybe again, and they chose to stay there, I would maybe like give them a treat or two or pet them and then do it again. But let's say you notice them tensing up and like act like really trying to get away from you, I would probably do it again later, like give them a break. But I know every situation's different, and I have tons of resources on my social media. And if you check out my events, I have a whole lecture on just how to medicate cats, because I know it's a hot topic, and I was really not given many tools. So I'm sure many of you haven't either. So.
And sorry, I didn't completely catch what you just said. Do you have a webinar in your resources on your website about medicating cats?
Oh no, I have one coming up though. It's something I present a
Okay.
lot at conferences, and I have a virtual event that is accessible to everyone on just medicating cats and handling. So you can find that at my
Okay.
website for sure.
Okay, and we'll share the link to that on Maddie's Pet Forum as well, because we did get a request about a webinar on medication techniques. And yeah, I'm sure everybody wants more information on that because we know how
Struggle is
stressful
real.
it is.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. Next question is related to someone who's struggling. They just adopted a fearful cat, and the cat made progress in the shelter, and but once she brought him home, he escaped and wouldn't eat for a week. So typical super scared cat. And it sounds like this person is pretty desperate, and she's asking if you're available for one-on-one consultations.
Oh, well, sorry that you're going through that, but also click treat to you for attending webinars and trying to learn more. I am, I would reach out to me via one of my social medias, because right now I'm actually only taking clients through a referral network, but we can talk because cat behavior, it's not just you all, we all need more of it, everybody. So yeah, I would just reach out to me via one of my Chirrups and Chatter social medias. And then I also have tons of videos on medicating cats on my social media too, because again, we all know I share a lot of videos because many of us learn the best by seeing. Everyone learns differently. So you could actually see me medicating different cats and just get little tips and hints, or you might be like, I do that and that's awesome. And let me know what works for you too, because I'm always learning from everybody all the time.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Next question is, I volunteer for a volunteer run rescue where the medicating is done entirely by volunteers, and it's a different one all the time. So in a typical week, a cat might be medicated by 14 different people. And obviously not all of them are going to be using the considered approach, but that's something to work towards. So how do you use the considered approach with a cat that is visibly stressed and lashing out, even at just the sight of you approaching, but the medication must be given?
Complex. So a few things which you already kind of touched on. I need to empower the volunteers and staff to be comfortable. Like handling is a skill, and we don't really treat it as a skill in our fields, which is a bummer. So first off, I need everyone to feel confident and comfortable and empowered, because I'm sure we've all been handling a cat and we're like, we don't know what to do. Like, this sucks, but they need this. And then we're just scruffing them repeatedly and doing the best with what we know, and it doesn't go well. So I think one thing is like handling lectures, workshops, attending events like this, and getting everyone empowered and educated. And then maybe some volunteers are really into behavior. Let's empower them and have them be the medication team. Or like when I'm doing clicker training with shelters, usually we pick 3 to 5 people. We're not teaching. The goal is, but we start with the 3 to 5 people in the shelter. So I think you could be one of the people where you could start to learn those techniques. And then if the cat's in a cage, it depends versus free roaming. The way I'm still going to utilize a considered approach, I would most likely just utilize a towel handling technique. So I don't have, I'm going on the rim here. Okay, so I don't have a towel. So we're going to do a quick. Guys, we make it work. Yes, I have toys in my office. So the towel will be bigger than this. Okay, obviously. This is not appropriately sized, but your hands are always away from the cat's mouth. And then you could it's a bib technique, essentially. So that can be really helpful. And then I'm still, all the things I said where they're to the side of me, I'm allowing them to remain where they want to be. There's no reason for us to be like flipping cats all over, which is what the internet tells us to do. And then I would medicate. Or I can even do towel. Oh, again, my hands are, this is what I meant by what I was saying earlier. Like towel goes over my hands, and I can do this. And then my go-to hold is this. And then I can medicate that way. Those are just a few different ways, but also if it's really challenging, we also have to talk about that with everyone, which I know communication is different in every shelter, But I'll be honest, there's some cases where I'm like, this is so traumatic for the cat that like I know they need these meds, but like, do they? Like, and these are complex conversations. Like, if the cat's like biting people and the cat is getting worse and worse and worse because people are doing the best and like it takes an hour to medicate, like we need to unpack that and help people be like, how can we do this better? Right? Because there are tons. I can think of 50 different ways we can medicate a cat. So we need to unpack that and like learn. And I know that's a complex answer, but that's a really good question.
Yeah. Yeah. Very complex, but loved the
No,
specific
amazing,
examples. That was
amazing
awesome.
question.
Thanks.
These are, and the 14 people, like, hey, can we get a medication team and empower those people? Like, that's a really good starting point, which you're already doing that because you're here.
Great. Thank you so much, Tabitha. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
And
Maddie's
thanks
fun
to
and
everybody
Sheila's always
for,
great.
oh, you're welcome. And thanks to everyone who came today and watched today's webcast.
Bye, everybody. Thank
Any,
you.
bye. Any questions we didn't have time to get to today, just to let everybody know, there's just a couple of them, but they will be answered on Maddie's Pet Forum, and Tabitha will be available there for the next few days to continue the discussion. And we'll see you again next month. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Bye.